Magic Ruler, also known as Spell Ruler, but it'll always be Magic Ruler to me, is Yu-Gi-Oh's third core set in the TCG. The set specializes in spell cards, which I've already covered the best of them. So in this video, let's rank the 10 worst cards in Magic Ruler, in the most logical way I can muster. And when you get to the end, let me know what you thought of the list, and what you would add or change. Number 10 belongs to a card that, while bad, it doesn't offend anyone except maybe your mother, and that's Twin Long Rod's number 2. In terms of weak, normal monsters, this is arguably the weakest of them all. Some come close, such as Mechanical Snail and Psychic Kappa. While you could argue one or another, I picked Roddy because his stats have the least to offer. Kappa and Snail have higher defense sitting at 1k, which is more valuable than their minuscule attack, and Kappa would be used as a combo piece for Totally Awesome for people that couldn't attain Frog the Jam, which was a McDonald's promo. I can't hate on a card too much for picking the shortest straw of the bunch, but let's be honest. Roderick is certainly a number 2, and not in the rankings. Number 9 follows the same philosophy, just with the one tribute line of monsters. While there's more than one to pick from with subpar stats, Octo Berser comes out on top. Some monsters in the set like Queen Bird at least has high defense even when Aquamador exists, and likewise, Giant Turtle who feeds on flames can make some use out of its defense stats. Octo Berser sadly has mediocre stats on all fronts with low attack and defense. There's nothing beneficial from playing a monster of this caliber, which makes him the worst of his kin. The Octo isn't even number 8, and that's just sad. Number 8 is the last of the normies, with this one in the 2 tribute line, where sacrificing 2 monsters leaves plenty more to be desired than before. Slot Machine slots in that slot perfectly. Compared to his contemporaries like Hyozan Ryu, Serpent Knight Dragon, and Ryuran, Slot Machine, same with the last 2 entries, fails to have any edge to keep him from being on this list. I understand the idea to incorporate 7 completed, however, aside from the source material, those 2 cards have nothing connecting them together. Slot would have been perfect with an effect to pull 7 completed from the deck once per turn, or even something like a fun mill your top 3 cards from your deck and Slot gains attack for each card sent, like an early version of Card Trooper. Yet here we are. I firmly believe it's unfair to have normal monsters low on this list due to their inherent poorness, so I had to discuss them here so we can move on. This one-armed bandit, unfortunately, has no credits left. Number 7 takes things to the back row with Snake Fang. Its simple effect may surprise you, where it decreases a monster's defense by 500 points until the end of the turn. But this card is slow, inefficient, and outdated. First of all, it is a trap, so you have to set it and wait a turn before you can make your aggressive push. Secondly, you have to target a face-up monster to affect their stats, meaning your choices are more limited than just defense position monsters, and less likely you can push over a face-down defender. Thirdly, we already have cards that do more with similar simple effects, like Reinforcements to buff your own monster, which can come up more often, and Rush Recklessly, which was also released in Magic Ruler, that adds more attack and is a quick play so you can activate it during either player's turns. Really, the biggest crime Snake Fang committed was being outdated on arrival, and as such, I didn't place it higher. This card bites. Number 6 goes to probably the most gimmicky monster on this list, Manga Ryuran. While yes, toons were bad for a long time, their debut cast wasn't that terrible. Mermaid can be special summoned, Skull only requires 1 tribute to special summon itself, and Blue Eyes can attack directly for 3k, which can certainly hurt. That leaves Ryuran with nothing to do. He's the most defensive of the bunch, but only beats Blue Eyes by 100 points, and his attack doesn't help accomplish anything the others couldn't do. He's simply a toon version of Ryuran, and that's it. This is a card for a gimmick deck that has no reason to play him, and that sucks. But hey, it's less egregious than the cards we're about to get to. Manga Ryuran was just one spoiled egg. And the Janjo Zone is a one duelist kingdom, so if you enjoy this type of content, consider joining my Patreon to support the channel. Even $2 a month is more than if this video got 1,000 views. Your help goes a long way to ensure the longevity of the Janjo zone. Number 5, at the halfway point, we got another special monster-themed magic ruler introduced: Ritual Monsters. While the majority of them weren't meta viable, the worst one is clear with Performance of Sword. In similar regards to manga Rerun, this ritual monster has the worst stats. Sword also needs at least 2 cards to get her out, and she has pathetic stats for its summoning requirement to feel justified, with not a single stat reaching over 2k. So you're losing 2 or more cards for something that can't beat over a giant soldier of stone? It would have been way better had Sword been a level 4, so you only need to tribute a low-level monster, which sadly that's not the case. This dancing soldier just comes off as more annoying to play than a purely weak vanilla, since you need the ritual monster in hand, the ritual spell, and the proper monster levels. And with toons, Toon World is the beacon in which all toons thrive on, and Rerun can at least punch over plenty of weak monsters. Performance of Sword as a card unfortunately fumbles. Number 4, we go to a purely effect-driven monster in Jigen Bakudan. While formidable in the manga, the physical card game is a different story. It's a weak flip effect monster that needs to be flipped during your opponent's turn because its effect triggers during your standby phase. If you can reach that point, it tributes itself to blow up all monsters on your field and your opponent takes half of the combined attack. Remember, since it tributes itself for cost, he excludes his own attack because God forbid you deal an extra 100 damage. Since it inflicts half the damage, you really need a large board in which you'd most likely be losing more advantage than if you had kept your monsters. If the effect used the full attack or destroyed all monsters on the field, then maybe it would be better, considering expecting this monster with 1k defense to survive against much is a tall order. And if you're playing a stall burn deck, then you're going to be running better cards anyway. Needless to say, this Time Bomber is a complete dud. Number 3 is a 4-star monster with high attack, Boar Soldier. Despite its base appearance, the effect is the crux of the issue. It has to be flip summoned, which, mind you, it has a measly 500 defense stat. On top of that, if your opponent controls any monsters, then Boar's 2k attack drops down to 1k. Ouch. Boar has all these roadblocks to prevent it from being playable in an era where we have Jurai Gumo and Dark Elf, of whom are immediately playable. This is a classic case of Konami overcorrecting a card's design, since it looks lovely, yet you look at it for more than 5 seconds and you realize both its attack and defense are equally terrible. It's a pig for terrible card design. Before we get to the penultimate card, I want to give an honorable mention to Final Destiny. Discarding 5 cards to destroy all cards on the field sounds powerful until you realize that discarding 5 cards is a tall order, even if the outcome is a Black Rose Dragon. Because by the time you're in a game state where it would be useful, having a specific heavy hand count that wants you to discard to destroy possibly your own useful cards on field is asking a lot. The design of it screams goofiness, which is more than I can say for any card on this list, but I figured I'd at least mention that I considered it. Number 2 is where shit hits the fan as we discuss Darkness Approaches. For a while, this is one of the weirdest cards in the game since its original effect would flip a monster into face down attack position, a position that would otherwise be unobtainable in the game. While later revisions would change it to face down defense position, that's not the reason it's on Janjo's top 10 worst Magic Ruler cards list. Its effect reads: discard 2 cards from your hand, select 1 face-up monster, and change it to face-down defense position. In many ways, this is worse than 2-pronged attack since TPA is a trap that can be activated as a reaction to destruction or used with defensive monsters in mind, and it destroys a monster. Darkness Approaches has the same card loss, with it not dealing with the issue at hand. The monster is still on the field, and while you can use it to flip your own monster, the card loss is astonishingly bad unless your flip monster is a morphing jar. Maybe even Dark World can make use of it and at least you discard cards compared to TPA, but generally speaking, cards that hurt your own game is the greatest sin of card design, and this card was surely designed to be a poor choice. Look at old school cards like Mushroom Man number 2 or Kotodama, and you can see their purpose within reason. The card in discussion was clearly intended for duelists to gain enough skill to read the card and say, no thank you. I would not approach this card. Number 1 is always a great place to be. That is, unless it's this list and your name is Wall Shadow. Firstly, to summon this card, you must have Labyrinth Wall on the field, equip it with Magical Labyrinth, and have a copy of Wall Shadow in deck. Yes, this card is as bricky as the walls of the Labyrinth as it does Zilch in hand. On top of that, you're using 2 cards to upgrade a monster with 0 attack and 3k defense for a monster with 1600 attack and 3k defense. Yeah, not much of an upgrade. Just keep Labyrinth and summon, I don't know, man-eating treasure chest. I get what Konami was going for in having a monster with Shadow Ghoul's attack and Labyrinth Wall's defense for a strategy to defend primarily and attack when needed, but a sitting wall isn't going to do much in an era with already so much removal, and a 1600 attack stat can't attack over much. It's as if this card was supposed to have an effect beyond its summoning requirements, like to attack in defense position or, dare I say, attack directly. That seems to be a common theme with some of these cards, huh? Oh, and I repeat, this is all considering this card is in your deck to summon it in the first place. It was one thing with Gate Guardian being a source material gimmick card. However, this questionable warrior monster from the manga and anime was already a fusion of Labyrinth Wall and Shadow Ghoul, meaning the card creators went out of their way to make this a worse card. Sometimes cards are made to be bad by default since there always has to be bad filler, but this is simply mind-boggling, and originally it wasn't my number 1 pick, but as I went on, there was clearly nothing worse in this set than Wall Shadow. Best to tear down this wall.